great to have you here. And I'm just fascinated to hear about what's been going on in Glastonbury. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, my name is Chris Baker. I'm a public speaker. Mainly I speak about health, which is it's not my main background. I have had some limited training. Other than that, I'm an electromechanical engineer, and I embrace all the science in between. First became interested in EMFs back in the Tetramast days, and I've held an interest in that to the current day. I decided to make a concerted effort to see if there was any inroads I could make with preventing 5G. And a lot of the talks I gave, people always ask at the end, but what can we actually do? And I didn't have a definitive answer, apart from saying, no, we actually don't want it. So this actually made me think that maybe this is the way forward to actually say no. So when I began to do some research, I actually found that all local authorities, councils, whichever type they may be, have a quite specific duty of care to their community. And when you look into their charters and their directives and their books of guidance, which they consult if they have to deal with a particular problem, without fail, in all of them, they have an environmental duty of care to their community, and also an environmental duty of health care. So again, when you look deeper into it, it covers all sorts of things, and pollutants are actually covered by that. I thought, well, EMF is actually an environmental pollutant. So the first thing was to convince the councillors that they have this responsibility, this duty of care, and it was pointed out to them that they have it, because everyone was very quick to say it's central government, they have the responsibility, it's nothing to do with us. And to go the route of central government, it's a real uphill challenge. And invariably when you write to them, you get the standard, we'll respond within 90 days, which is, too long to wait, and invariably they never get back. So to approach a council, who are the actual people who really can make a difference, it's a more passive route, it's a much easier route, a more friendly route too, because you can actually liaise with the people who can actually make something happen. In terms of what they can make happen, if a council agrees with all your findings and they're open to your suggestions, there is only one thing that they can do, because they can't actually just say no. They have to be seen to be going through a process. And the only process that is actually open to them is to invoke the principle of precaution, which in itself is a really big asset in this campaign against 5G frequency emissions, because basically it says we're going to have a pause. Now, the reason that invoking the principle of precaution works is because when an authority invokes it, it's in writing, it's sanctioned, and it has credence, and it's tangible. So no one can undermine that. And as far as I know, the only people that can revoke it are the people that invokes it, if you forgive the play on the words. So this was the route to go, and this is the only result that you can expect, other than say no. But so far, I haven't come across a council that has been so resistant that they're not prepared to listen and acknowledge that they have that responsibility. The method basically is to introduce doubt that they have the responsibility, and when they look, they realize that they do. And then from then on, it's just a case of compromising them into being seen to be proactive. I know it sounds easy in words, you know, but it takes a lot more than that. Attending the meetings, making yourself known, getting to know the councillors, actually befriending them in actual fact. And, you know, at the end of the day, they're only human beings like you and I. They're open to suggestions, and, you know, they go away informed and enlightened. And hopefully, when they meet as a council, they make an informed decision and the right decision to say, we actually don't want this technology in our town without further consultation and assurances that our community are safe. So that's basically all I've worked with. I've tried other routes. I've tried the more aggressive approach, you know, and pouring words over them. But in these early stages, they don't need all that much information. And my role and other people now, their role is to approach and befriend their councils and get them on board. And once they've invoked the principle of precaution, you know, then you're nearly on the home straight. So
That's
ultimately,
great.
yeah. So ultimately, you will get a good result by the more passive approach. And yes, there's lots of ways to compromise council, you know, with legal things. But I've found in my experience, if you compromise them or threaten them with legalities, they tend to close down. So this has been a very passive approach on health grounds.
Brilliant, Chris. And, you know, I think everybody needs to look up online about when their local town council meetings are. I did a YouTube about this about a month ago, and we need to connect with our councillors, try and befriend them. A lot of them are probably just completely unaware of what the technology is. I mean, there may be a minority. I know up in Gateshead, Mark's had a lot of issues, but up and down the country, a lot of them are non-informed. They're balanced. They're juggling a lot of different things. And maybe they're, you know, when they're changing these street lights, they're not realizing that this is the infrastructure that's being rolled in for 5G to be able to be up and running. And a lot of them are just not informed of the health risks, and they're probably tuning in to the BBC News where there's, of course, nothing critical on 5G. So I think just getting there and, of course, going with others, I think, is important, isn't it? You know, if there are several of you that are interested, then the councillors can see that there are several people who are concerned. And
yeah, you're very, very right in what you say. And at the end of the day, a lot of people on these councils, you know, they're preoccupied with council business, and suddenly when this comes along, it's a bit of an unknown. So part of this role when you engage councils is to gently educate them, you know, rather than go in firing at the hip and making demands of them. I do find that tends to close them down quite quickly. Excuse me. And the other thing which is important, after maybe your first meeting, it's always good to start a petition, because they may well ask for proof that there is concerns in the community that they don't actually want this technology in their town. Invariably, you only need 1,000, 2,000 signatures, which would demonstrate that there is a concern in the community.
that's really good news, Chris, because in Botness, we already have over 1,000, between the 1,000 and 2,000 mark. And of course, we spoke just over a week ago where I asked you what sort of issues, what did you say in your first council meeting about, you know, how you raised the issue, and then what you instructed the councillors to do. Because I remember you mentioned to me that it's important to give them an instruction, and of course to target your local areas. So you have these larger council meetings, a Devon County Council, but try the local area first. So for me, it's Totnes, the most local part that covers that small area that you live in. And then I base the petition around that. And of course, you can start one. You recommended change.org, having an online one, and then a paper one where you just go around collecting signatures. That could be on a market stall, going around friends, knocking on doors, collecting those, and then bringing those with you. And I stood up, and you normally get about 30 minutes. Everybody gets about 3 minutes each to put forward their question or say what they want to say. But it's more of a statement really than a question, isn't it? And of course, you're saying, look, the key things, if you're fine to talk about that, Chris, duty of care, invoking the precautionary principle. What are the key things that members of the public, when they go to these town council meetings, need to instruct and remind the councillors about?
Yeah, well, the most important thing is to actually ask them to do something, because a lot of people just go and talk to the council, but you actually need to ask them to do something for you. So probably after the second meeting, if the petition is up and running, and it doesn't have to be complete at that point. So you actually read out that you started a petition and you task them to respond. Now, the reason for the petition is at subsequent council meetings, because most councils are made up of more than one councillor, and sometimes as many as 16 or 8 or whatever, there will always be someone who will ask for justification. They say, well, where is the proof that the community are concerned about this technology? And you can back this up by saying, well, there is an online petition that is well endorsed. It's currently running, and we will furnish all the signatures when you wish. Some councils ask for a percentage of the community in terms of signatures, but invariably a few thousand is normally enough. The reason that we did hard copy petitioning, it was just belt and braces really, because we were up against time constraints. We really wanted to up the signatures quite quickly. And the great thing is with hard copy petitioning, very fortunate in Glastonbury, there are a lot of good people here who gave up their weekends and went out on the streets handing out leaflets and getting people to sign the petition. And they were sharing a lot of information with people in the street who knew nothing about 5G. So it was great. It was sort of almost self-perpetuating. But it is important that you do have a petition to back up your claims, because in the template letter that is part of the petition, you actually state in there that there are concerns in your community that this technology can be harmful or debilitating to health. And if anyone ever asked you, well, where is the proof? You can say, well, we're there. All these people have signed.
That's very interesting. Thanks, Chris. And if you do a 5G event in your local town, you can, of course, pass the petition round amongst all the people sitting in the audience to sign. So that's another opportunity.
Yeah. One thing we just reminded me, one thing that we've always done before a council meeting, which is now at 7 o'clock, invariably most councils, we always tend to have a group meeting with the local initiative, which is always good. That always helps. And also when the council chambers open, there's a lot of people present, and just their presence sort of demonstrates that people are concerned.
Brilliant.
I only sort of give a talk about health and 5G frequency emissions, and we pick up quite a lot of new people who want to actually come to the talk, and then they actually do come to the chamber meeting, and you just sort of gather moss, as it were. So that was quite a good thing. It happened more by accident than anything, but it's brought a lot of new people in who are now part of local initiatives, and some of them have gone off to start their own.
That's great. And just a number of things that you mentioned to me when I was drafting what to say to the council when I attended my local town council meeting. I mentioned about the fact that, of course, when you're mentioning the petition, that's really important to express that to the council, that you're basically bringing to their attention that there's a general consensus of the people in the local area, and that this technology has not been risk assessed. So it's experimental technology which contravenes the Nuremberg Code, the RF radio frequency official government exposure guidelines and criteria does not cover the effect of 5G frequency emissions, and it's outdated. And the other thing you mentioned is the exposure, of course, to young children, which I mentioned in my 3 minutes. And then the other thing being, of course, the fact that their frequency emissions, they're almost like a pollutant, and that somehow sort of spurs the councillors to do something, doesn't it? You felt it had an effect. And just a couple of other things to mention, Chris, is that all of this research conducted by these hundreds of scientists and doctors, they're referring to peer-reviewed studies, and just towards the end, of course, as we mentioned, asking the council, instructing the council to invoke the precautionary principle to before, so that people can make an informed decision, and of course reminding them that they have a duty of care.
Yes, and these are very important. The actual letter, it's been written quite a few times to include a subliminal message there by making reference to certain things in a certain way, which I think goes in at another level as well. I haven't actually changed the original one that we used for Glastonbury. It has been used elsewhere with success, although some people have actually tried to actually change it and not getting the right result, because it's almost minimal. It's just basic essential information with a request for council to do something, but in a gentle way, firmly placing the responsibility firmly in their laps, so to speak. And I think once they actually realise that, yes, we are actually responsible for our community's health, and we need to be seen to being proactive in doing something, even if they don't know what they're going to do. They have to do something. But as I said earlier, the only option that is actually open is to say no. But there's no way they can just say no. And this precautionary principle is the only option open to them, which is great. It's not a legal concept, but it's an internationally recognised point in law, which basically says we would like a pause while we gather more information. And it actually, when they invoke it, because as you probably appreciate, it's documented, it's written, and it's invoked, and it has credence.
That's brilliant. And just to add, Chris, the current state of Glastonbury now, I mean, Glastonbury Council have basically invoked the precautionary principle, haven't they? And what's the current status of play?
Well, while we're on that subject, I would like to make it quite clear because it's come up quite a lot today, where people say, oh, they've actually halted 5G in Glastonbury, or they've stopped it. We actually haven't stopped it, because invoking the precautionary principle is not the same as halting or stopped. And I seem to spend a lot of my time explaining to people that it doesn't mean that it's stopped. This is just the first stage of a process. So having invoked the precautionary principle, we now go to the next stage, which, in my opinion, needs to be that the council will form a subcommittee or a works committee. In the case of Glastonbury, they've called it a select committee. Originally, there was only going to be 3 councillors to make up this select committee, and now I understand there are 9 councillors out of the whole council who want to be involved in the next stage. And the next stage is, and this should actually apply to any council that gets this far, they now need to take expert advice from expert witnesses and read good scientific evidence to support the claims that are being made that this technology is indeed has the potential to be debilitating and affect our well-being. So now they have to take this expert advice and listen to it and make an informed and balanced decision to officially say, well, we actually don't want it. We're not going to have it, and they actually make it official. Now, how they make this official is they actually enter into a contract with their community. And the reason this is done is because they are actually honouring a commitment that they have a duty to do. They are cementing this in writing and forming a contract with their community to say we're not having 5G in our community. Now, this is actually attached and part of a moratorium as well. So not only do they enter into a contract with the community, but they will put a time limit on, because a lot of people don't actually understand what the moratorium is. And basically, it's an agreement to do nothing until a specified time is elapsed. And in Glastonbury, I'm guessing that they are going to ask for 2 years. And as far as I know, by entering into this contract with the community and tagging on the moratorium, I don't think there's a district council or a county council can actually overrule that, because they're actually doing what they're supposed to do. And it is understood that if anyone wanted to overturn it, it would have to go to at least a Crown Court to overturn it. So this is the next phase of the operation. Unfortunately, I couldn't be in Glastonbury last night when the next stage was activated, and later this afternoon I'm hoping to meet up and get the full lowdown on all the details of what transpired at last night's Glastonbury meeting.
So basically the takeaway, Chris, is that everybody up and down the country really needs to start attending their local town council meeting, get them to invoke the precautionary principle, get the petitions done, paper petitions, online petitions, and then try to move this on to the next stage, and, you know, to basically create this moratorium. And of course, when you're going to this first meeting, I think giving the councillors evidence, I remember you said giving them a copy of what you actually say in that first meeting each, and pass it round so that they can each take a copy of what you've said in that 3 minutes, and then give some evidence about the health concerns that have been expressed by professionals. So for me, I handed around page 1 of the space appeal. And yeah, scientific evidence show, you've got the EU appeal, the space appeal. I mean, I look at those. I don't know if there's anything else you suggest, but.
No, you're correct. Thank you for reminding me. I'd actually forgotten to mention that. But it's very important that any address you do to a council, my advice is don't try and remember it. Just write what you need to say and read it straight off of your hard copy. But do take enough copies that every councillor there has one of their own. I've never actually, on one occasion, I did sort of hand out folders of information, but this came at later representations. But I didn't want to overload them, initially. And I also say, if there's ever any information you want, very happy to furnish it. And a lot of people do actually ask for it. But yes, whatever you actually say, it's very important that they have a hard copy, because they will go away and they will read it, which is great. I appreciate when they're at a whole council meeting and they probably listen to many speakers, then they have their own agenda to deal with. They don't always remember what you've actually said. So if they've got a copy of it, they will go away and digest it, which encourages them to ask questions. Because quite often after a meeting, maybe a few days later, you'll get a letter or an email, and don't forget to put your contact details on the bottom of the hard copies that you hand out. And maybe individual councillors will ask specific questions. And I've rarely come across any that are anti. They're few and far between, but they're so close. It's almost a waste of time responding to them. But most councils rule by majority, and the ones that are close to it invariably sort of get left behind anyway.
That's great, Chris. And yeah, that's really informative, and I think that'll help a lot of people moving forward in terms of what to do, because a lot of people are still digesting a lot of this information about 5G. They're very shocked. They're thinking, how do they deal with it? They're very scared. But these are practical steps that people can take to raise awareness within the local community, and at the same time to get their councillors on board. And another thing is, if people hold an event, then of course they can invite their councillors to an event as well, and then educate their councillors, will get an education at a 5G awareness event about what's happening, and they can invite them for free, perhaps, if they're charging everybody else, to just get them in offer to take them over.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for reminding me, John, but we've always done that as standard practice, but I did forget to mention that. And invariably, if you write them a nice email inviting them as your guest for the evening, sometimes reserve some seats at the front to make them feel a little bit special. It all helps pave the way. But just to reiterate, at the early connection with your council, it doesn't work if you start going in there shooting from the hip. You're out to befriend these people. These are the people that can make a difference. And ultimately, you will end up with new friendships with them. At the end of the day, they're human. They do a job like everybody else, but they actually do a job that we can actually interact with them and help them to make what our job is a lot easier. And then a bit later on, you can be a bit more assertive with them. But initially, the whole thing is to befriend them, to get their faith and have dialogue, meaningful dialogue, as opposed to anything negative.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, there's growing awareness happening now. It was just a couple of weeks ago where I was speaking in Bristol on 5G. And on the same day, we had Jeremy Nadler from Nexus magazine, who was speaking on 5G in London. And then you and Mark Steele were speaking in Forest Row. How did that go?
Oh, yes, I remember. Yes, yes. That actually worked quite well. I spoke first, which was great because I was able to cover the more sort of house sides for the benefit of newbies and people who just wanted to know more. Unfortunately, it was Mark's show really at Forest Row. I made a short appearance at the beginning, but it was nice. It just sort of introduced people, and then it took them to the level where they could jump onto what Mark had to say. Because he was suggesting that we did a double act. Actually, I'll be the warm-up guy.
I think that's the best order when, with Mark, because of course he's explaining about how it's the whole weapon connection. And I think for some people, it's quite explosive, it's quite shocking, whereas you're able to ease them in. And this is what I try and do, just, listen, folks, look at what the doctors and the scientists are saying. And then Mark comes in and then he gives the full whack on the whole military aspect of it.
Yeah, which was great because I appreciate that there are lots of people who want to know more, and if they know nothing at all about 5G or its ramifications, I think newbies need to come in at a slightly softer level, because with Mark, for the more seasoned audience, he's a hive of information. But for someone who knows nothing to come in at that level, it's I don't know, maybe quite disconcerting for them because they haven't got their head around what 5G actually is, or what it can do, or what it will do. So yeah, I look forward to another opportunity to double up with Mark with a much longer time to speak.
And of course, it was your first time meeting Mark. What was your impression of him?
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. He's very, very endearing. We spent a little time afterwards to have a catch up, and for me, it's the first time I've actually seen Mark speak, as a member of the audience. Yeah, I actually learned quite a lot, and although we're coming at the same thing in different ways, there was a very big overlap of our techniques or how we go about things, and this common ground was great. I thoroughly enjoyed the overlap, especially at the end when we both had a microphone each, and we were fielding questions from the audience. And I think we went on to beyond midnight. It was a very successful night, and Vanessa Vine from Forest Row hosted the event. I think she should be very proud of what she achieved that night. It was very, very well supported. People came in from many areas, which is a good indication that people are interested now to learn more and find out everything there is to know about 5G.
Yeah, that's fantastic. One other thing I was going to mention. Oh, Mark said you're taking some of the flack off him now because he's been under attack a lot, and you get these people, don't you, online? They just criticize you. They're like, so and so, Mark's a shill, I'm a shill, you're a shill. And we're just trying to concentrate on stopping 5G, aren't we? And you always get people like that.
Well, there is this ununified fraternity out there, and for me, for many years, I've just been off the radar, not under the spotlight, just going about what's happened. But with what happened with Glastonbury, where it was televised and there were Radio 4 interviews, it went global within 24 hours. And then, I don't know, then suddenly I'm thrust under the spotlight, which I've never been before. And didn't realise that there is a fraternity out there who will look for any opportunities to pull you down or ridicule you or whatever. In one way, I understand Donald Trump now about fake news.
Yeah.
You know, I'm actually having it, and I thought, well, I haven't done that. I haven't said any of those things, and unfortunately, it consumes so much of my time fielding off people saying, "Well, is this true?" And you know, I really don't have time to extend that sort of energy to keep responding. And I know Mark is quite seasoned. You know, he's sort of weathered these sort of things. But for me, in little shoes, by comparison, it's been quite an affront to who I am. And hopefully, you know, these people will eventually give up. It's just the nuisance value of it. Why we can't all be unified and focus our efforts in our own ways, in how we want to do it, but still arrive at the same goal. It's just so disruptive.
Yeah. And I think it turns a lot of people off as well, doesn't it? You know, as soon as they see, you know, I won't name names, but certain people spending more time attacking others in the 5G campaign than spreading awareness of the 5G dangers themselves, then people get turned off by that and will naturally gravitate to those who are really trying to make a difference. And I think, you know, when people like you, me, Mark, Ian Crane, we come together, we're able to share what's working and inform the public in the best way possible. And yeah, people have just got to use their discernment, really, haven't they?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the proverbial head. Discernment, because sometimes I see a lot of infighting on some of these 5G platforms, and it's energy that could be used elsewhere. And you know, I think when people actually step back and look at what's actually happening and do a bit of a reality check, eventually they will realise, you know, that you know, we're not fakes, we're not frauds, we're not government spies, we're not working for the government. And one person even said, I must work for the government because I've even got a grey car, you know. Apparently in America they have black ones, and government workers here have grey ones. And it's almost laughable, but still it's I don't know. Anyway, I've learned to let it all go over and not to give it too much energy, and just push on with what needs to be done.
That's
And
fantastic.
these people will eventually just fall by the wayside.
Yeah, I think so. Anything else to add at all? Or, you know, if people want to get in touch, have you got a website they can reach you at?
Unfortunately, I've had to close my website. You know, this trolling thing. They've tried every way but which way to get in contact with me. But I am contactable by email. And if people do get in contact, if it seems to take a while, you know, I am getting through them. I've received quite a lot of mail recently, but I am sort of getting through them. Always happy to take phone calls.
Okay.
For people that do have my number, I can cover so much more ground with a phone call than writing, because I actually prefer that. Because it all takes time, and for me it's more screen time, which I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm very, very, very happy to talk. So yeah, you know, please do get in touch. I'll try and answer anything that I can. And in answer to a lot of requests, I am still trying to finish this layman's guide to taking on councils. You know, which everything you need to know, most of what we've discussed. So I just need to find some time to finish it. It started as a one-page bullet point, and it's sort of grown into a few pages now. But I think this really does need to go out to people, and it's a Janet and John guide to what you need to do, how to say it, and generally covers in more detail what we've talked about today. So as soon as that's available, we'll find a platform, either with yourself or whatever, to make it available to everybody.
Sure. I'm happy to help you get it out there, Chris. That's fine. Just let me know when the timing's right on your side. And I just want to say a big thank you for giving me your time today. And, we've really got to get behind people like you and people who are making a difference here with 5G, because we don't have a lot of time. But I think the key takeaway today is that we've got to go to our town council meetings, peacefully engage with our councillors, and bring awareness to them about 5G, and to really get them on board, and make sure it's only one day a month. So if we regularly attend those meetings, we can make a difference.
And most councils, once they've got their heads around it all, they're quite happy to have a meeting in between meetings. They come as a collective for an informal chat and a talk. It's always important to befriend them, really.
Yeah, that's really good knowledge. That's useful information, Chris. Well, look, big thank you for today, and you keep up the great work. We'll keep fighting. I'll fight in Totnes. I had just one quick thing. Of course, I read out the 3-minute question that I put with your recommendations, and Totnes Council are now going to meet me privately to discuss how to move forward with stopping 5G locally. So we've got Froome on board as well, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, and now Taunton.
So
Yeah.
It's really happening. It's like a domino effect, isn't it? So we've just got to keep pushing.
We just a quick one before you go. A young lady in Taunton has decided to form her own Taunton group, and she had her first address last night, and she was great. A little bit wobbly in the middle, and then I spoke for 15 minutes while she composed herself, and she finished off absolutely amazing. And afterwards we had district councillors, county councillors, all offering support and help, and again using the same approach, the same letters and same way, and she's like the cat that got the cream this morning.
Fantastic. That's really good news.
Yeah, and it's so lovely to see so much enthusiasm.
Yeah, definitely. It brings a lot of hope to all of us.
One thing, I've compiled a list of everybody who has said no, everyone who's invoked the precautionary principle, and I'll see if I can actually send that to you, because it's like the definitive list, globally, who's done what. Because people always ask, well, who else has done this? And instead of pulling things out of the air, I furnished a list. I won't take credit for compiling the list. It was done on behalf of myself and a few others, but I'm sure there'd be no problem to share it, because it really makes good reading.
It does, yeah, and it adds to your arsenal, in terms of helping to stop 5G. When you're saying to your councillors, look, we've got all these other people who have got on board with this.
It gives it so much more credence, So, oh my God, I didn't realise all those countries and all those people have. So I'm just going to ask tonight for permission from the guy who very kindly compiled it and furnished it, if it's okay, that it goes out publicly.
That's great, Chris. Much appreciated.
All right, John.
Great to speak with you. Keep up the fine work.
Yeah, well, you too, and thank you so much for today.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
I'll say farewell from Glastonbury.
Farewell.